Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second episode of the Rising Right podcast. My name is Grady. I'm here with my friend Nectarios, and we have a very special guest today, Eric Aarvoll from the Return to the Land community. Eric, can you please introduce yourself and what you do?
Sure, yeah. I'm the president of the Return to the Land PMA, so our private membership association. We are national. A lot of people believe that we just have this one project in Arkansas going on. And currently, that is the only full time residence, active, intentional community in our network. We have a lot of people all over the country, a large group in Idaho, a lot of people in Tennessee. So the goal of the PMA is to establish white intentional communities all over the US. And that's also at some level my politics. I don't believe in taking control of the federal government and changing the nature of the country. I think that's basically out of the question. It's just not pragmatic. And instead, we should lean into freedom of association and use networks like Return to the Land to establish that precedent, both culturally and legally, that we should be allowed to do our own thing. Aside from that, I teach Platonism online. We do courses on the Iamblichian curriculum, which is a set of Platonic dialogues plus Neoplatonic commentary uh, devised by the Neoplatonic philosopher Iamblichus. Although a lot of those dialogues in the set were already used as a kind of pseudo canon by the Middle Platonists, and then also we cover Aristotle's Organon. That's on Thinkific, those courses. Aside from that, I like doing projects on prehistory. I'm very big into the Upper Paleolithic. Right now, I'm doing a deep dive into the origins of the Upper Paleolithic, and where did behavioral modernity actually come from, and then stuff like Atlantis also is related to that. So
All right.
Very cool.
And I have been watching some of your philosophy videos. I think they're pretty, very well put up and like 2 hours long, some of them, but it's really good to like sit back and like maybe while you're doing work, listen to it, like when you're mowing your yard. Really solid stuff. But the first question I want to ask is what inspired you to start the Return to the Land movement or colonies or membership, however you want to call it?
white genocide was the primary motive. You know,
And what was that white genocide clear, like the most clear to you? Like what era? Was it illegal immigration? Was it birth rates?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you just look at birth rates, you look at the rates of immigration, you look at the birth rates of non native born people, it's pretty clear that whites are going to be a small minority by the end of the century. And beyond that, our existence is simply not secured. I grew up in Southern California. I saw the way that Mexicans and other groups did have a sense of in group, they did cooperate, and I don't trust those other groups to afford us the same rights that they have been afforded under our majority status. So when whites are a small minority, I'm afraid that the same kinds of narratives will be promulgated then. Whites will still be painted as the villains, rather, of history, and we will be victimized as a result. And so I don't want that to happen.
Very well said. And it seems like a lot of these people enjoy being the victim too. So I can't sit here and say that they'll have any pity on us when we become the victim because they've been told ever since they got here and even before that they're a victim from us.
And also, I wanted to ask, like, is there a particular event that happened or a moment in time that made you decide, okay, I have this idea for building white communities and preserving our culture? And what was the point where you went from that idea to putting it into something more concrete?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was one particular event that inspired it. I was always interested in intentional communities. Even as a kid, I thought it would be cool to get a bunch of friends and buy a piece of land somewhere and just kind of get away from the grid. So I always wanted that. And I, I guess it was really just learning the facts about crime statistics, the facts about demographic change. Like when I was red pilled, so to speak, the immediate thought for me was okay, there's really one viable path that we can take. It's to create our own communities. But more than that, it really stemmed from a desire to create our own institutions broadly, and that's built
Okay.
on communities. But the thing with, so the Jews obviously have enormous influence on our societies because
Mhm.
they're networked, because they
Mhm.
actively lobby. They have many organizations advocating for their interests, and we don't have any of that. So they established that by having a network of intentional communities. That's how they got into Europe in the first place, right? They
Right.
lived in the ghetto, right? They weren't only put in the ghetto by the monarchs of Europe, although sometimes that was the case. They also self segregated, and they would self segregate in the Near East as well. They've survived for 2,000 years without a state until recently because they would form their own networks and they had their own schools. I think that education question is really central. And I think we're nowhere near where we need to be if we're ever going to pull ahead. I think, in general, having the ability to shift culture and political power is downstream from science and technology, really.
Mhm.
Um, like the world empires, the powerful hegemons through history have been the most technologically advanced.
Mm,
So I
yep.
think we have that in us, but we don't own any of these institutes that we would need. So for a long time, I brainstormed about alternative educational models, and we're just not there yet. But we have now at least begun to build that foundation in our own communities. So the Jews are several thousand years ahead of us,
Mhm.
unfortunately, but
Mhm.
we can make up the gap, I guess.
Yeah.
I
And
think we can. I think you're doing a
okay.
great job at that. It seems like, you know, the Jews segregated themselves and no one bats an eye, but when you segregate yourself with some 50 so people, the Arkansas Attorney General gets on your case.
Yeah.
Oh, quick question. I remember earlier you mentioned that you don't think it's very viable to for us to try to get into the federal government or anything like that. So are you anti-politics, or do you think that a precursor to doing politics is first preserving our people and our culture?
You need a base of support before you can launch political campaigns like that. Our enemies control our government because of their networks outside of government. They don't go as individuals and run for office and then once they're all in position then affect their will. No, they have all sorts of NGOs that bring candidates up, that fund candidates, that fund the education of potential political representatives. So we're not there yet. We don't even have a political action committee. We don't have think tanks. We have nothing. We have essentially nothing. And in order to build to that point, we can't just join existing institutions because A, we're discriminated against. B, they already have a lot of momentum pushing in the other direction. So rather than trying to combat that on their terms in their institutions, which are large and bureaucratic and inefficient, we should use the technology that we have today, especially social networking technology, and we should build radical new systems that allow us to gain real economic and social and cultural power that can then be used to affect political change. But yeah, we are simply not there yet.
Okay.
Um, I'm not against people running for office. Go ahead and run for office, but it's not going to amount to much unless we have this robust network of NGOs and think tanks and communities like our adversaries have.
So, like, not even in local communities, like you live in a town that's like nobody, right? Do you think someone who lives in a town that is like a population of less than 1,000, if they ran for a mayor and had the community on their side, do you think they could make a difference?
They can make somewhat of a difference locally. Sure. It's just that's not the principal agent of change
Mm.
because, I mean, people kind of project the way that they think as individuals onto social dynamics. They think that if all of us just act in this particular way, if all of us do X, then we'll create change. but that's not how humans work. You don't get like everyone spontaneously to behave differently without building some kind of infrastructure that shifts the incentives, that gives people the training and a motive to behave differently. So I think there's two ways that people make this mistake. One is thinking that when enough people get angry and get red pilled, they're just going to spontaneously revolt against the government. We're going to have civil war, we're going to have a revolution, and then the new regime will be us. It's just hopelessly naive because we're expecting everyone spontaneously with no organization to do something that large groups with millions of people have a really hard time doing, that are organized, that have logistical chains, to give support to whatever actions they want to take. We have none of that. We have no organization, no hierarchy, and that is ahistorical. You don't have revolutions like that. The French Revolution was led by a counter elite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, counter elites, that's the other way that people make this mistake. They say, oh, we just need a bunch of high human capital people to infiltrate government and make change. But they're still thinking of that in an individualistic way. The French Revolution, that counter elite, they were Masons, they were Illuminati, they were people who had robust infrastructure for training, for disseminating their propaganda, for organizing. We don't have that. So, in order to get to that level, first you need places where we establish our own culture and demonstrate that it actually works. Um, just abstract think tanks don't work. The Masons, they had physical institutions. Back then, so they didn't have intentional communities, but it was a community hub. People lived relatively locally within these urban centers, but they were white urban centers where obviously there are different pressures for us today. We can't operate in inner cities. We can't, I mean, our civilization is infiltrated and broken. Back then, they still had a majority population they could work with. They weren't like among hostiles per se. They were pushing for a hostile ideology, but they could safely organize that within the context of existing communities. We don't have that level, the base level of that whole pyramid structure. Where are these radicals living? Where is this counter elite coming out of? Where are they being trained and educated? They had also educational institutions. In some ways, like the Jesuit model of education was influential on the Illuminati and the Enlightenment broadly. Mm-hmm. So they had a long history of their own types of educational systems. So that was all feeding into this counter elite. You can't just wish for a counter elite to come into being. And even if you have people who are especially intelligent, every generation has people who are especially intelligent. Every demographic out there, like there are especially intelligent blacks, even not many of them, but like IQ is not it. You don't just get a bunch of smart people and that makes the difference, because everybody has smart people. The Chinese have smart people. The Jews have smart people. Maybe you have a couple IQ points on them, maybe not, depending on your sample size, depending on obviously the demographics that you're coming from. Yeah, like whites, broadly speaking, if you're talking about the whole distribution, probably we have the highest IQ people in the world, because probably, although it's a lower average than East Asians, it's a really wide standard deviation because we have more diversity, essentially, genetically, and in our historical ways of life, more individualism. So I've always predicted, there's more white Gentiles, a wider curve. There should be, the very most intelligent, like genius level people in our ranks. But that's talking about the white distribution as a whole. And that's not the people on our side, because most whites today are not pro-white.
True.
So yeah, if you're talking about the million or so people who actually are reliably on our side, who are willing to make, okay, and a million people aren't willing to make sacrifices. A million people are willing to entertain themselves on X and blow off steam.
Mm-hmm.
but they won't do anything. But even if that was the number, then you're talking about this kind of bell curve. And where does that elite in that million fall? Probably between 140 and 170 IQ, which is not the top. So we have bright people. We have people who are overwhelmingly more intelligent than the average of any other group, but the other groups also have that. So this reliance on like we just have the best people, we'll get our people in, it ignores the fact that we are institutionally discriminated against from the get-go. The institutions already have a momentum of their own, and people do have perverse incentives as they ascend the ranks to negotiate with and work with our adversaries. And sometimes they can justify that in a Machiavellian way and say, well, you have to wheel and deal if you're going to get in these positions. We have to be in these positions to make the necessary change. And I think there's going to be an attrition to the system when you send people as lone individuals who are inherently self-interested, just like everyone, just sending them into the mainstream system and hoping that's going to affect the necessary change. You're going to lose a lot of them. And even the ones that stay in, it's not enough. And they don't have enough of an advantage just because they're high human capital to make a serious difference. Without concrete networks, without our own education systems, we are so far behind. It is, I think, delusional thinking that we can bring about that change through this kind of entryist strategy.
Okay. And then
That was good.
you mentioned we need this like base to build from where we have these networks, these communities, um, these ways of funding and manipulating politics, and we don't have that. So then, what can the common person do? Like the ground level, some guy that doesn't really have all too much money or resources to his name. What can he do to help contribute to this cause?
Well, you could join Return to the Land, and instead of paying money as rent to whoever you're renting from, get into some kind of arrangement with people on our side. Then all of that money doesn't just leave our networks and go to, I don't know, Jewish or Indian landlords or whoever it goes to. Or if you're buying a house, you buy a house that was built probably by a crew of Mexicans. You're paying those Mexicans. You're paying the mortgage companies. Those people are not on our side. So if you don't have many resources, the thing that you can do, look at your life. Where are you spending your money? How can you keep that money in our own networks? Well, living together is the way. There is no other way to make a serious dent if you don't have those resources already. So it's basically like stop subscribing to the mainstream system and paying into it and start subscribing into our system.
That's well said. And like I see like when you talk about builders and stuff like that too, like you're paying Mexicans to build a house. This is really bad in Florida. Like the developments in Florida have been awful. I mean, so much territory has been just wrecked by developments. These Mexicans build it, and the houses are like paper. They fall apart, right? And we look at these old houses from hundreds of years ago, even like my house that was built in the late 19th century, it's still standing. I can't say the same for some of these houses that are built by Mexicans. And it's it's a problem also because you're dumping more money into a system that you just already dumped a lot of money into to get the house built, to get the workers moving. Then you're dumping more money into your because your house is made out of paper, and then you never get that traction. So that's why I agree with you. I think it has to be a thing of because tribalism is just going to have to pop up. It's going to have to work, and I think you're doing the best at it. I think the common man, should invest in what you're doing with whatever state he's in. Because I saw on your website you have different areas. Like, oh, I'm doing it. I think you had one that was playing in like South Georgia, maybe North Florida, and then three in the Appalachians, some out west. I mean, there's going to be a time where someone can find one of these communities close to them. And I think that'll probably be hopefully around the end of the decade, maybe the beginning of the next decade.
We don't have that much time. We have to move a lot faster than that. We can't be waiting decades anymore. Because within a decade, okay, the thing about, and this is another point, culturally speaking, it looks like there's so much energy on the right. It feels like we're winning. When you go on X, on these major platforms, our points are just dominant. But you have to remember, the internet has always been overwhelmingly white and male. That's the nature of who goes online and participates in this stuff. It was white men who had representational government and decided to, contribute to this discourse over the centuries. Other nations, they're more authoritarian. The people don't get involved in that sort of thing. So we have these minority groups here that are slowly building in numbers. They're not online contributing to the discourse at nearly the rates that we are. So it looks like we have this huge contingent and it's way overinflated. They look like they're losing culturally, but every year, demographically, they are still building up. Now, the foreign born population has diminished somewhat, but who cares? Because other groups still have higher birth rates when they're here. So there are more Mexicans, and they will vote Democrat. Maybe if the Republican Party adapts sufficiently, they get slightly more of the vote, like they did in this last election, but it's never been less than what, 65% Democrat. It's any non-white group, they vote Democrat.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, they see them as the immigrants opposed to the native white interests, and they see the Republican Party as representing those native white interests. They're just gonna vote against our interests regardless. So in 10 years, can we win an election at the national level? Probably not. In 20 years, is it possible? Definitely not. That's my estimation based on how non-whites vote and based on the demographic trajectory. And whites aren't suddenly having way more kids. And even if they did, there would be a generational lag. So
Mhm.
if the birth rate spiked in this year, okay, well, 18 years from now, I guess we could start turning the tide with our voting.
Yeah.
But we're not doing that because we're not in an economic position to increase our fertility rates. I think the number one reason we don't have enough kids is that we can't afford it and our social systems are broken. So we don't have 20 years to play around. We have 3 years to set precedent and make a lot of change really, really quickly. And it's possible, but not if people are complacent.
Do you think a good strategy would be to like, because in the 2020 election, the Proud Boys were brought up. Do you think it would be good if people like you or maybe Thomas Rousseau and Patriot Front were brought up in the 2028 debate?
I think it would be interesting. Yeah, I think, Rousseau, I respect very highly. And I think he has built the most competent organization in our circles of anyone. There is no group better organized than Patriot Front. And young people, if for no other reason, then you will learn how a dissident group can actually organize from all angles, OPSEC and what the hierarchy looks like and how they, organize their actions and so forth. You should join and be a part of that. Very few people have been doxxed. And if at this stage in the game, you're afraid of it being known that you have your political opinions, I think we stand no chance because every individual just wanting to secure their own livelihood and keep their options open if they want to go work for Google or some big corporation, like there's no progress that's going to be made
Mhm.
because yeah, Providence doesn't reward cowardice, and that is a form of cowardice. So people should join these groups, Patriot Front, but we do have disagreements. I think Thomas Rousseau is much more of a traditional white nationalist. He thinks we should take back the country. I think his rhetoric lately has shifted a little bit more towards we need to build the nation within the nation, which is also my ideal. But he's not letting go of this idea that the United States is a government for white Americans by white Americans and should be that again. I've kind of made that concession rhetorically and at a deeper level that the United States government isn't a nation state, right? We're not for a
Mhm.
particular group. There are many different nationalities in the country. That means de facto we're an empire. That's what we are. Now we can get entangled outside of our imperial boundary, but the United States is vast and there are many nationalities involved. It is, even in the continental US, an empire. So when we think about what's possible and rhetorically in terms of what can we appeal to the electorate, um, the white nationalist stuff is not going to work. So I would disagree with Thomas Rousseau there. And I think that the return to the land position, emphasizing freedom of association and building our own communities and returning to traditional values and so forth, that even non whites can accept and agree with. So when you raise that and that becomes the focal point of public discourse, then there's really no excuse for people to automatically reject us. People will hear us out. Thomas Rousseau's thing, where we're going to take the nation back, period, that's inherently extremely threatening to all non-white people in the country.
Mm-hmm.
That's nearly half the country.
That's I like that a lot. So I've actually talked to, because like your movement has really blown up across the internet, and I've talked to many blacks and many Hispanics of all kinds about your movement. And what I found is that every single one of them said, well, they're out there in the middle of nowhere, they're not hurting anybody, who cares? But there was about half the white people I talked to who had a problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said earlier is really true. It's like we have white people who hate themselves. When I can go ask a lot of Mexicans and blacks, like, hey, this guy's out here, he's not hurting anybody. What do you care? I
Mm-hmm.
don't. That's what they would probably respond with. I don't. It's like they're not hurting anyone. But whites have this thing of that's hateful. That's discriminatory. You can't do that.
Right.
And it's obviously it's built up from a number of decades, from a Zionist push of all white people are demons and need to be wiped off the face of the earth, and that's going to continue because you still have white people like in New York City voting for like Zohran Mamdani when he says I'm going to tax white people more than anyone else, and white people will vote for that because they just hate themselves for some reason. And again, like you said, with like, a million people, a million white people, well, not only are they not willing to make the sacrifice, but a lot of them still have this idea of we can still run elections and get things done. I'll just go into a Trump rally or a TPUSA rally and say, so what's going on with white birth rates? And the whole nation's going to change overnight. Even if the whole country did red pill, there's going to be resistance, and who's willing to fight that resistance? Not many people.
Yeah, hardly anyone. If we had actually a million people on our side, we should be able to have billion-dollar institutions.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't. So therefore, that million figure is greatly exaggerated. I mean, it looks to me like we have 40 to 60,000 highly motivated young people who would potentially do something. But then if you look at the membership across all the organizations, we're talking like 10,000 or less.
Really?
Yeah. So I think it's people just get the wrong idea when they look at view counts. I like to think of it in terms of this kind of principle of tenths.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a million views on a post. How many likes is that going to have? Maybe 100,000. That would be a lot for a million views. So realistically, it's less than a tenth. But from seeing it to being willing just to click one button that now is private, no one even sees that you liked it. But in order to spread that content, it needs likes, and people don't even click the like button. 9 out of 10 people out of this million don't even click the like button. Now, of the people that like, if you just want to boost a post, it also helps to comment. How many people reply or comment? Like 10% of that.
Mm-hmm.
So very quickly, it started looking like, oh, a million people are on our side. They're waking up. But then you realize, well, only 10% of that is willing to even click a button to marginally support it. And then really only 10% of that is willing to click a few keys. It doesn't have to be a long message. Any message boosts the algorithm.
You know, I also want to point out like another one of the issues I find is that people are very comfortable right now. They don't feel the need to go out and do activism because the electricity's running, they have water, they have a roof over their heads, and they don't want to lose that or lose their jobs that provide that for them. What do you say to those people who feel that there's no reason to
Well,
because they're
I
comfortable?
think they should know that there is a reason to. This is high time preference behavior. This is, I want to be as comfortable as I can be for as long as possible. And it's just not thinking of what's the country going to look like in 20 years? What will your kids experience? What about your grandkids? So, yeah, you might have to put up with giving some opportunities up. But if you do nothing, then we're going to remain on the present course. Just to finish out, like, okay, it looks like 1 million people. Actually, it's 100,000. Actually, it's like 10,000. Now, the jump from I'm willing to leave a reply or a comment to I'm willing to donate some money, that's again another tenth or less. So you go from 10,000 people decided to reply to maybe 1,000 people support whatever project this post is coming from. 1,000 supporters. Okay, now a lot more people are willing to chip in $10 than are willing to join an organization and risk doxing. And that's another 10%. And now you're down to 100 people. From 1 million to 100 people who might one day show up. Now, from someone who's going to show up occasionally to someone who's going to be highly active, now that's another 10. Now you have 10 people. It started with 1 million. Now you have 10 people who would actually do anything.
Mm-hmm. And that number, it's like people still, they had this idea of, well, I won't do it, but hopefully someone gets inspired and does it instead for me. It's like, no, you need to do it. And like we see these movies growing up of like the Revolutionary War and World War II movies to where these men are taking this call that they had and they're going to go fight. And people love that so much they get inspired by it. When that call hits, like the time is now, that call is hitting. They're sitting in their bed, scrolling on TikTok in the dark, blankets over. And they're like, well, someone else will do it for me.
Yeah. I forget what this is called. Oh, it's the bystander effect.
Right.
The more people see something happening that requires intervention, the less likely any of them are to intervene. If 2 people see an old lady fall down, then they'll probably both jump in and try to help her. If, 50 people are nearby, they're all standing around, she falls, then no one's quite sure, okay, who has this covered? Someone else probably. So the more people are privy to something, the less any individual is likely to actually get involved. And there are a lot of kind of game theoretic and psychological dynamics that are working against our coming to any kind of mass shift politically or just in a spontaneous, disorganized way making change. Because again, all of those dynamics just left to nature, to like human nature and sociology, we're not going to have enough engagement. And even the people who will be engaged, we're not talking about 100% heroic, self-sacrificial action, doing whatever it takes. We're talking about, I'm going to get on a live stream. We're talking, I'm going to put a sticker up on a pole. Like that's the essential limit of what people are willing to do. So instead of expecting this kind of organic, disorganized change because of sheer numbers, which we actually do not have, we have to build organizations with the handful of highly motivated people that are out there. We have a few dozen here. Hundreds of thousands of people have heard of Return to the Land and support it. Actually, millions have heard of it. Hundreds of thousands support it. A few dozen actually are willing to make a move. And this, like, we've made it as easy as it possibly could be financially. This is very affordable. Like a young man right now, it's not even like we're asking for your money. Like a young man who wants to get involved and learn the skills and get in the organization, they can come here and camp for free if they're in the PMA. So come and live for free. And we have work right now that needs doing. And we have like 2 young guys who are actually doing it.
Wow.
And we've talked about this publicly. It's far, far, far worse than people understand. The lack of motive, because everyone thinks individualistically, I want to do this. And when they think of organizations, they think of themselves as the head of their own hypothetical organization. And then when they look at the actual organizations that are out there, they say, well, that doesn't live up to my ideal standards, and therefore I'm not going to support them because I could do it better. But then they're not doing it.
Exactly. Yep.
Mm.
And I saw that picture that you posted a few days ago on the Return to the Land page of you and like everyone in the group, and it blew me away how many kids were there. I didn't realize just from the videos, like the videos that Sky, I think it was Sky News did, you only see about 5 kids with their faces blurred. And but with that, I think it was like 15 kids almost, or if not more. That was a lot of kids, and that's awesome that this is going to be the future of Return to the Land. You guys have something set up like that to where these kids will take on what you have. And so I want to ask a question about what you just said there about coming to camp. So if someone is a member and they roll up there with their RV or their truck or camper, they can just drop it on the land and say, "Hey, I'm here to work."
Yeah, pretty much. You have to make an arrangement with one of the shareholders on the land currently. So you can't just kind of show up unannounced and expect, like, work with somebody here. Like, I'm letting someone stay on my lot up front now.
Mhm.
And I've done it in the past, and I would do it in the future. Other people also are willing to make space for others. Um, but then when it comes to, like, if you're a PMA member and you want to make a deal to actually buy in with us and have a homestead here, it's really not that difficult. Like, if you could afford $1,000 a month, you could probably own someplace with us, own into the corporation within 2 years, you know. Um, but that does involve roughing it. Like, if you're expecting a really high quality apartment suite, like, yeah, we don't have that. It's, you'd be camping, you'd be living in an RV, building a small cabin, and working up from there. Essentially, people are addicted to comfort, and
Mhm.
we're expecting a change without addressing that kind of fundamental level of the problem. We're ruled by appetite. What's the problem with
Mhm.
our elite? They're usurers, they're
Mhm.
merchants. They're people who are dominated by appetite. They're not the courageous warrior ethos type. They're not the philosopher king motivated by rational ideals. They are the best at making money. Okay, so they're the people ruled by appetite. And we, with that as our elite, we are acting in their image. Even people who are really prominent on our side, their highest ideals are making a lot of money, getting into a high status position in society so that they can individually make a difference. They're like, I want to be like the billionaires, but on a smaller scale, and expect things to change. It's like the people winning the game right now are um, that merchant elite ruled by appetite. Now, we can feed into that and try to imitate that and expect a better result, or we can say appetite is inferior to courage. And that's inferior to reason. And we can make that leap and live in a way where we subordinate appetite to honor and to philosophy and make necessary sacrifices. Or we can say that's unrealistic. People want comfort. We need to cater to people's appetites. The system caters to people's appetites. If that's the game that you're playing, the system will win every time.
And you'll eventually just like you're again, if you're playing into the system, you're a part of it. Even if you have good intentions, you end up being a part of it. And I think a lot of these guys who like a young, let's say a young Ted Cruz, probably had good ideals in his first bit of his life. But as soon as that money comes knocking on your door, you swing so hard to the other side that those ideas you had are way in the past. And that's why, like, if you play into the system, they'll just get you on their side for money. And that's why it has to be like a group thing where you work with the people who you trust and you love, not these people
Right.
who you're skeptical of, like, I don't know, drinking baby's blood in a back room somewhere. But a question I have for you, and this is really big for a lot of people, is what did you find to be the best way to community build?
Well, it took a long time. You know, I talked to a lot of people who say they have similar plans or they've been trying similar things for a long time with no real results. And you just have to kind of reconcile yourself with that fact that it is incredibly difficult to build the momentum to get a handful of people together to make lifestyle changes. So I've been advocating this. I feel like I was pretty quick to get it, that like this is the only viable option. 2012, I become aware of the statistics. I see the direction of the country. I'm like, okay, here, this is it. This is our option. And I started immediately advocating for that. After 10 years of doing it, I had made effectively zero progress. I got one guy one time to come out and try a project. We actually did get into a deal to buy land. No one else was going to come. It was just going to be me and this one guy. And then ultimately, we got into a bad land deal. It was like a slumlord situation with a rental and really shady contract. So, I was younger and a lot more naive about these sorts of things. So, got out of that. I paid the guy back everything he was going to contribute. So that was the one episode where almost I did something. And then there was a group of like 5 content creators on YouTube prior to that where we were going to share an apartment. And I did live in an apartment with 2 other YouTubers, and then a friend from college, straight out of college. So as soon as I thought, okay, we have to build community, I lived in an apartment with these guys, and nothing really came of it, obviously. And even in that context, there's no sense of like a shared project or, what is this building to? It's just like, we're getting cheap rent. Good for us. And then that, and of course, interpersonal difficulties. And like I had to adjust and learn what that even looks like, because we are very self-directed and individualistic, and few people are willing to compromise. And so I tried doing what I could, and probably fell short on my end. Wasn't prepared to be the kind of person that could take a situation like that and turn it into something larger. So that ended. Our lease was up, and we went our separate ways. And then that situation with the land deal fell through. And then for years, I realized like I have to have some money to invest in land before I can even consider doing this again, because it was just going nowhere. So I worked hard, ordinary jobs for 6, 7 years, and then ultimately bought land down in Arkansas at the beginning of COVID, sight unseen. I just needed to have the land because of what was going on in New York State, where I was living at the time. And then from there, it was, not enough land to do anything meaningful. I bought land in southern Missouri with a house on it. That's where I lived for a few years and was planning on doing a camp. So that's the level that I had gotten to before any meaningful change actually took place. I was going to do a Platonic Academy kind of thing and Media Institute on this 13 acres in southern Missouri. I would build a few cabins, build a restroom facility. Okay, simple concept. I was talking about that. This is my plan on my YouTube channel. Now, granted, back then I had a far smaller audience. I was talking to 10,000 people or so. But at that point, when I had that level of credibility and that level of reach, then I was able to get a dozen people to say they would show up and help with an infrastructure project for that, with the understanding that, hey, we might pursue a bigger group land buy or something. So before you think I'm going to go do this on my own, it took me a decade trying it, getting 10,000 followers, and having my own land, having worked for 6 or 7 years, full-time work, not part-time, whatever, like an actual career, blue collar, but an actual career, making decent money for a long time, having my own space to do it. That's the baseline where something was actually able to take place. And it wouldn't have happened unless it just so happened that the right people came together. So I got incredibly lucky that one of the people who saw that I was doing this was Peter Siri, our current secretary. He had been living in an intentional community of vegans in South America for 10 years. And he effectively was their contractor. He, I think, founded the community in the first place and did a lot of the legal work on contracts and everything, actually managing that community. So he had 10 years of real world experience. So it took, again, 10,000 followers, 6 or 7 years of actual full-time income to build something, talking about it for 10 years, Then the necessary people came together, and it took someone who was himself like very skilled in exactly what we needed, and he had 10 years experience. And then it also took a few people who just had a lot of resources themselves and who were very highly motivated to make it happen. That convergence of factors, I think, is incredibly rare, and you shouldn't expect it to just be duplicated.
Well,
Um,
that's why it's important to just follow the guy who already
well,
suffered for 10 years and try to hop on board.
you
Like
don't have time to mess around for
yeah,
that length of time.
Right.
And if everyone is going to need all of those things to converge in their particular example, their particular case to do something, then a very small number of communities will ever exist, and it will have a minuscule impact on culture and politics. So, actually building from that point, once the people came together, we did calls on a weekly basis talking about if we were going to do a land buy, how would it be structured. Initially, we were just thinking, okay, maybe a tenancy in common. We all, for those who aren't familiar, you can own land tenancy in common where everyone's name is on the deed. You're just all co-owners. Now you can have different percentage ownerships, and you can in a contract write up who's entitled to what section of the land and everything like that. But in a situation like that, anyone can sue and break up the whole arrangement. So if someone feels aggrieved in a tenancy in common, it's really easy for them with a little bit of legal effort to just shut the whole project down, and there goes the community. So for a long-term community project, it's just not wise. And that's what I was aware of initially. And then I thought, okay, to avoid that issue, maybe we just buy land and subdivide it, legally subdivide it. And that costs money. You have to have it surveyed and everything, and then filing fees for getting the parcels themselves reflected in the county plat maps and stuff. It's a process, kind of tedious. And then, well, at that point, what happens? Someone decides to move, and then they have no control over who moves in. You put it up for sale, and it's just not legal to discriminate in perpetuity and keep that community of a particular character. So what we ultimately landed on, of course, is a corporation owns the land, and we own shares in that corporation.
Mm-hmm.
So we're indirectly landowners, and then our internal bylaws spell out who has rights to what section of the land. And I wouldn't have come up with that on my own. That was Peter Siri who brought that from his expertise in South America and additional research that he had done when he intended to come back and do something in basically the Ozarks. He had decided on the Ozarks himself, and then that's why it all kind of worked out. But we had those calls, we had ongoing communication. We talked about plans for a media house. We talked about plans for everything, right? And without that kind of commitment to we're going to speak at least once every week for several months, we wouldn't have really had that sense of camaraderie and common mission when we actually met up in person. And then you do have to meet each other in person and vet each other. Now that's sort of handled because Return to the Land, we are facilitating these regional chapters and facilitating their weekly or monthly calls. So they're going to have meetings for a long time, and then they will meet each other at our national events, and there are regional meetups as well. So that's kind of the formula. Begin having regular meetings. We also encourage people like take meeting notes, because in order to run these communities, you're going to need to have a board of directors. You're going to need to take notes of your meetings for the board and share them with your members for transparency. It's like all of that. How do you actually run an organization? That's a learned skill. So to begin learning that and equipping yourselves to actually manage a community, have regular meetings and don't just informally get together and talk about whatever. Have an agenda. Have someone facilitate the meeting. Have someone be the note taker. Get through that agenda, share the meeting minutes, and eventually, think about electing a board. Have a president, vice president, treasurer, secretary, maybe a member at large to do whatever odd jobs come up. And really also think about everyone's time is worth something when you're organizing. So far, like I have gotten a lot in donations because a lot of people are sympathetic with the project, but I've not personally been paid to be the president. Peter has collected some money for particular jobs, but he bills by the hour, right? So people take time out of their lives to do all this organizing. And we have to realize there's a value in that. And if you don't incentivize people to do it, they're not going to do it, because people don't spontaneously just, arrange meetings and take notes and come up with agendas and like make tangible progress on scouting for land, on writing the documents that your corporation will be based on, like all of those steps, researching the laws in your particular county, getting to know the people in your county who would be responsible. If you were sued, what judge would you actually see? All of that. There's so much to it. And people kind of just take it for granted because they don't see any of that. They think I'm working, I see myself working 9 to 5, and that has economic value and I expect to be paid. But then when it comes to who's going to actually make these communities happen and organize it, we don't think that way. We don't think that this is something like I need to pick in my region, who am I willing to say, yes, this person deserves some kind of support in leading something. So we have to value leadership. I think, again, very individualistic. We're like a herd of cats. No one wants to admit that, yes, this person is more qualified and they should be put in a leadership position. And then when they're put in a leadership position, we shouldn't expect that just saying you're the leader is enough in terms of compensation. Because being a leader means taking a lot of time out of your day to make the whole thing happen. So we have to compensate the people who are willing to even lead. And that's another thing. It's like very few people are willing to take on leadership roles. Everyone in their mind, when they're in their computer chair arguing on X, feels like, well, I would know what to do. And they argue as if they could be the leader of something, but no one actually takes the time out of their day to do these things. So compensating the leaders, also compensating people for all the tasks that require doing. Like people with communities, especially, they just expect that, okay, well, we'll have a shed somewhere and we'll share our tools. Everyone will put their tools here and we'll save on, but then what happens? Well, some people abuse that and they ruin people's property. And who's going to own the shed where all the tools are? Who's foregoing, like, I paid $10,000 for this building and now I don't get to use it because everyone's tools are in it. Like, who's going to compensate that guy? Is he just expected to eat a $5,000, $10,000 loss? Because people have unrealistic expectations of what communities can actually be like, because they expect that, oh, we'll just all spontaneously together do these things without responsible parties leading projects and initiatives and without compensation for those who are taking time out of their day to make things happen. So that all those things, realize that people's time is valuable and we have to compensate each other if we expect each other to take time out of our day and do things. Now, it's possible to have volunteer directed behavior. We've had several projects here that were on a volunteer basis, not the majority of them. But if you say, like, hey, on Saturday, we're all free, we're going to go and do this section of fence. Well, then, okay, no one's going to be paid. But if you're expecting, Joe to show up Monday through Friday and just build your fence for the community for free, you're delusional, right? So it's a lot of things. And then also like respecting the other people involved and saying, whatever my preconceptions are about how community should look, on the flip side, this other guy also has his preconceptions. And you can't expect that everything you're walking in with in terms of what you're expecting out of community is going to be perfectly realized, because it won't. It will not. Community means you're negotiating with other community members and listening to their concepts and sometimes adjusting, even if you still believe that this would be best. If community is going to happen, everyone is going to have to compromise on some things and say, okay, I'm not going to get my absolute ideal perfect scenario. You're not going to get yours. We're going to meet somewhere in the middle. And it takes a lot of humility. It takes like personal growth, and it can't be immature people. We also need people of all age ranges. So there are just, the more I live through this experience, the more I see that there are many, many variables that all have to come into play. And without a large organization developing best practices and giving guidance on it, it will happen organically so rarely that it's almost irrelevant. This is it's an interesting social project, and there are still major challenges to overcome. Um, but I think, yeah, those lessons of humility and valuing other people's input and time and all of that, it's something people will learn as they participate in Return to the Land, or it's something that people do learn if they participate in Patriot Front. When you're a part of a large organization and you see what it actually takes to make things happen, then you start to value these things correctly. But the vast majority, that million people who saw that one post that one time, hardly any of them get that. They're living in the realm of idealized pictures that they see, and to bring them down to reality, they're going to have experience with larger organizations and larger groups. And there's just like, who else is there? What can they
Right.
join?
And I just a quick question. So, this sounds like a very challenging process, and you seem to have gained a lot of great experience in this. I was just wondering, like, what are you doing to improve this process, make it more streamlined, and to have your communities grow even more? And then also, what is say someone wants to start something of their own? What is the best way to gain these people? Because as you put it, it's very difficult to come by people that actually want to step in and do something.
Yeah. Well, if you want to do it totally on your own, you're on your own. If you want to do it with Return to the Land, well, then it's fairly straightforward. You join the association, you get in your regional chat, and you get involved. Um, so there may be someone else who's already the facilitator of meetings in your region. Fine, like, work with them. You can't expect to just be in charge immediately. It's ironic. It's like, I don't even know how to describe it. It is the case that everyone wants to be a leader, and also no one's willing to volunteer to lead.
Hmm.
It's like no one's willing to put up with anyone else being the leader, but they're not willing to make the necessary sacrifices to be the leader themselves. So it's like you got to pick one or the other. Okay. But anyway, if someone else is already taking initiative, be a good follower. In order to be a good leader, first you have to be a good follower. Now, if you have a bunch of qualifications, say you have run corporations, right? You've had like 100 employees under you. Good. If you just join in good faith and participate, people will see your leadership skills and they'll be recognized, and people will want you to lead the project. Here, like, I didn't particularly want to be the president of this. I actually wanted to remain in Southern Missouri and have my little academy and media project. That's what I wanted. That was something that I would have total control over. It wasn't as much of a risk for
Mm.
me. Here, I'm part of a bigger thing that is to some extent out of my hands. But they wanted me to be involved. And so I obliged and I took on that role, because they could see that I would do a good job at promoting it. And to some extent, I have. And Peter Siri, he's someone where we all saw his organizational expertise, and we all wanted him to help organize our legal documentation. We valued his time. And if you have serious skills, other people will recognize it. Also, be open to the possibility that you don't actually have those skills yet. And if you don't have those skills yet, like, where did you learn the skills? If you think you are equipped to lead things and that your vision should be realized rather than someone else's vision that they also care about, where did you gain the skills? Who taught you? And if you weren't taught by anyone else, when did you discover it for yourself? And what was that process of discovery where you acquired the necessary expertise and knowledge to do what you say you have the ability to do? So again, humbling yourself, participating in what already exists is the number one way to accomplish some change. Um, I think also people have an unrealistic expectation of what they themselves are going to get out of community. There have been several projects in our broader spheres where people did buy land together, but what that actually was people gave one guy money to develop his land that he owned in his name. And
Okay.
that guy had a bunch of perverse incentives then to take advantage of everyone else. In some cases, sell the property at a huge profit and pocket the money.
Mm.
So I think there's a temptation to want community to serve you rather than I want to dedicate myself to a larger cause. It is about the community. It's not about what the community is going to do for you. It may not have short term immediate benefits. In some cases, it will. For some young men, just having the ability to come out and camp and get gainful employment, that's enough. That's a tangible benefit they can receive immediately. But we have also had young men come in and receive that tangible benefit and then just leave, because they didn't see anything else they stood to gain. Um, yeah, I mean, I could give like cautionary advice all day about the different sorts of issues that have come up. And it's going to be a lot more than you're anticipating. But despite that, it's also something we must do, something we have to do. The system they've built for us, it caters to our appetites. We all feel in charge of our own lives, right? In reality, we're all wage slaves and slaves to international finance, debt slaves. But it feels like day to day, I can go wherever I want, when I want. I have total independence, and people like that. And then they take the money that they make working for the system. They buy some video game, they buy a nice TV, a nice computer, they entertain themselves, and then for like 2 hours at the end of the day, they act as though they're an idealist and some kind of fighter for the cause as they reply on X posts. Um, and you're just going to have to break yourself out of that delusion.
So I gotta fix my webcam here. I'm gonna ask this question before I fix it though. How many? So you say we have a very short amount of time to act, and when I said a decade, you said we don't even have a decade. How many of these colonies would you like to have up, where many people live, running just like the one in Arkansas right now, stable, perfect, and by let's say 2028?
Yeah, I mean, that's the deadline essentially. And I think we need at least a half dozen. I think it's possible. It's pushing it to some extent, but I think it's realistic that we have six. They may not all be like really well developed and highly populated, but at the same time, a lot of new members are coming in, and I think as it becomes easier, as infrastructure has already been developed by more of that pioneer set of people, then we'll see the population rise in this community, in the other communities. It's still not guaranteed to be enough, but the difference there is rather than one isolated group of people in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas, in one state, you have multiple states involved, multiple communities, and that's something that the country will then have to decide: do we persecute, you know, dozens, hundreds of innocent families that just wanted to be left alone? So it is, you could see it like a bargain, or we're kind of wagering a lot on this. But I think it is that desperate that we kind of have to. Either people will learn to sympathize with people on our side having the right to do this, or they won't. The larger it is, the better the chance that just emotionally it hits home. Already, I think people, their minds are being turned to some extent by the fact that we were willing to actually do something. If many more people, hundreds of people, are willing to make lifestyle changes, it's largely about the public reception. Partly, it is also about the legality. So, on the legal front, one path, if we weren't sued, so let me lay out the timeline a little bit clearer. I don't anticipate, and I could be wrong, I could be proven wrong tomorrow, but I don't anticipate in the next 3 years that we're going to face the serious legal challenges that will eventually come, because there's no reason for Trump to split his base by sicking his DOJ on us. That would only hurt him. The Republicans can't really afford that for the midterms or for the next election. So probably in the next 3 years, we just build and maybe proactively try to get bills passed that clarify language around private associations and how the Fair Housing Act may or may not apply to them. Because a lot of what we're relying on, it's a couple lines of text in a few bills that we interpret to mean we should be legally allowed to do this. And apparently, the Attorney General in Arkansas, at least for the time being, also believes we're allowed to do it. But what you do is pass proactively bills, and you can get a few lines of text inserted into an existing bill, work with lawmakers in your state. And we do this in 4 or 5 different states. We do it in Idaho, Arkansas, Tennessee, Georgia, West Virginia, let's say. Now you have a very strong precedent where when the federal case comes up once the Democrats get in power, then it looks like, well, all these various states have allowed things like this. Therefore, there is this, national precedent to some extent. The trick is, as usual, our enemies are essentially ahead of us when it comes to this strategy, because very recently a bill was passed in Texas that kind of did the opposite of what I just said. So rather than setting the deliberate precedent of interpretation in our favor, it kind of said, when you have private associations of this racial character, etc., they should not be considered exempt from this and that. So, so Texas now, that bill passed.
The Sharia law one?
Yeah, supposedly it was meant to address the Muslim community, but there was a religious exemption in that bill that effectively meant that it didn't impact the Muslims. It essentially was an anti-RTTL bill in some substance. So as we try to pass bills and set precedent in our favor, our enemies will, with their Zionist-controlled state congresses, just pass things to the other extreme. And then when they're back in control of the federal government, they can point to the 20 different states where they had these bills passed. So, 5 communities may not itself be enough from a purely legal perspective. Because state laws can be changed, bills can be passed with virtually no input from the public. It's just these representatives who are bought by AIPAC who actually make the change. They can top down change our laws with undemocratic mechanisms, and it doesn't matter what the public perception is. So I think the battle will have to be fought at the level of public perception, where we are persecuted. We'll have set some legal precedent, so we have a plausible case. If we were just, flagrantly violating the law and had not done our due diligence at all, then people wouldn't be behind us because they'd be like, well, it's illegal. I don't care if it's right or like they're, blatantly breaking the law. So we do what we can on the legal front, but ultimately, I think it's going to come down to people will not tolerate seeing families, children dragged off of their homesteads because they wanted to live in a quiet, peaceful, white neighborhood in a rural area.
I mean, find me. Sorry, go ahead.
The image they can't afford the public to see. So anything that we can do when we get to that point, when that dramatic moment happens, we have to have as many communities as possible. We have to have as much legal progress as possible. And then, we see. And I think that probably does happen in 2028.
This thought has probably crossed your mind, but it kind of just if we could have one of these Muslim communities out in Texas, say, and what could happen? It could be a false flag where they kill a bunch of people on the territory, and then the whole country rallies around. We must stop these all whatever communities, and it doesn't matter what's in the bill as long as it's labeled "Stop Muslim Communities." It'll get passed, and then that could shut you guys down in a sense like that.
Right.
And I think that what you just said is good, because if you guys are, I guess, martyrs for the cause, in the sense of there are videos of you and kids getting dragged out of their homes saying, hey, you cannot live in the middle of the Ozarks by yourself when you're not even hurting anyone. The majority of people are going to go, I don't even want to live out in the Ozarks. I mean, I'm living out, let's say, on the East Coast or the West Coast or somewhere. Leave them be.
Yeah, yeah. I think that would be a situation then when we take control of the national conversation to such an extent that we can leverage that into political influence and create a response. Whatever the situation is then will determine our political options. But the more extreme it looks, the more people are involved in these communities, and the harder we've worked to do everything in our power to abide by the law, then the more belligerent the state appears and the more anti-white. And then options are opened, and there's no way to exactly anticipate what those will look like. In the meantime, though, like you mentioned, what if they do a false flag and attack intentional communities for other reasons? Well, that's a propaganda move, and we need our own propaganda moves to push for intentional communities in a more proactive sense. And so, what we do is create an association of intentional communities of all different types, not just white intentional communities, and make this a big sticking point and say we all have something in common. We want to be free to have our own way of life preserved. And I think that intrinsically is the stronger message. And it's one that could go a long way. Building that kind of association is inherently difficult, though. I mean, I can work with the people I'm working with now because we're all identitarians who have consumed a lot of the same media. It's, yeah, I say it's easy. It's like, it's still very, very difficult, even with all the commonality that we have. But it's easier than it would be working with that. Like, how would I even communicate with that Muslim community in Texas?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, once you start being pragmatic about it like that and working with other groups, then a certain contingent of the white identitarians are going to be like, oh, you're talking to brown people, therefore you're a bad actor, you're a Fed. And then they're going to raise this big stink. Ironically, it's what the Feds would do themselves. Like if they see that this is an effective move on our part, then the Feds, who probably already have infiltrated Patriot Front, Return to the Land, all organizations, you should expect you're going to have informants and agents in your ranks. It's just inevitable. So don't break the law ever in any sense, you know. But when it comes to that, if I make alliances with other groups, they are going to be the ones who in turn will call me a Fed and bad jacket me because I'm not only working with white people. So there's a lot of unrealistic tendencies in our circles. Overall, people get very optimistic about top-down political change when there's no reason to be optimistic. And they're also ideologically purists to an absurd degree. And then to an extent, really, where it becomes self-contradictory. And I just made a post about this, like people will advocate for might makes right, and we should own the entire planet, and white planetary colonies in the future, we should conquer the stars as the white race and everyone else be damned. But then like you're being genocided in your own homelands now by I don't want to just say that, but like by Jewish influence and other interest groups that don't want us to have that dominance. Mm-hmm. So if might makes right, well, from your own position, what grounds do you have to object to the people who are currently replacing you in your own countries?
Exactly.
So it's like we take these positions that are, it's inherent to the nature of the echo chambers that we are actually in. This is a well understood phenomenon with social media, hyperpolarization. The algorithm rewards sensational content that is highly stimulating, because they're tracking as you scroll how many milliseconds do your eyeballs spend on each post. And people spend more time looking at posts that are highly stimulating. Either they're attractive, it's a pretty girl, or they are highly averse to what they're seeing. So it's black crime videos. That's the kind of stuff that engages people. That's what the social media platforms want, because that's eyeballs for their advertisers. And then they can justify charging more to their advertisers and making more money. So social networking sites inherently lead to polarization, where you get a ghettoized community where they're all stimulated by the same sorts of images and ideas, and that just ramps up. Like any addiction, you start drinking on the weekends in small quantities, and then you start drinking more to get the same effect. And then you can't be satisfied the rest of the week when you're not getting drunk. And so you start drinking daily. And that's what happens in these echo chambers. Highly stimulating things start at a base level, and just gradually people ratchet up in their own echo chamber to unrealistic expectations of political change. It's essentially like political pornography. That's what it becomes on X and effectively any other platform. So people have very unrealistic expectations, and you should, just by the principles of game theory, understand that that would be the case. So stop thinking as a member of this mob and expecting things to magically change. Start getting involved in small organizations, because we don't have large organizations. Start getting involved in organizations led by people who are high agency and who are not driven by mob dynamics. Individuals can be rational, groups cannot be rational. So stop expecting large groups to do the what is in their rational self-interest. They won't. They'll keep on amplifying messages that are emotionally satisfying, and which grab people's attention, and which garner clicks and views and advertising revenue. And we shouldn't expect it to be any other way when it comes to those platforms. So our own
And
recommendations. That's it.
it seems like a big problem on the right, especially the right, and the left does this like they never do it. It's the right has this problem of I could agree with you on nine things out of 10, but this one thing makes it to where we cannot talk and
Right.
you need to be labeled as a terrorist organization. But the guys out at Portland at these ICE facilities, the guys in Chicago, they probably don't agree on everything. Even though they're still against the ICE agents, they're uniting on this one cause of, hey, we don't like the ICE agents, even though we disagree. One could be a Democrat, one could be an anarchist, whatever. They're still going to attack these ICE agents. But the right, you have this thing of like, oh, you don't think we should deport all the migrants? We can't agree on everything, or it's something more like that. It's like emancipation, maybe it could be like
Unity.
LGBTQ laws. It's a number of things. It's ridiculous. It's like when people like talk about your group with return to the land, they could agree with you going out and doing it, but they don't want it to be a thing of he's doing that and he's being hateful. Well, what did he do that was hateful? Did he go attack someone physically and harm someone? No. And then conservatives, mainstream conservatives won't like what you're doing because I think because you're pushing the right in a new direction. That is right now moving on the internet, but as your average person, it's hard to see who that is because no one wants to say that. When you walk up to someone who actually knows about return to the land and they're very supportive of it, if you walk up in a group of 5 to this person and say, "Hey, do you support this?" Like you said, maybe a tenth of the people would say, "Yeah, I do," with confidence. I think a lot of people cower and they're scared. Oh, what if this person knows where I work? What if they know my social media? What if they know where I live? They don't want to lose these things of just saying, "Yeah, I support these people."
Mm-hmm.
And
Um,
on the topic of the uniting of the right, what do you see as like the are there limits as to who we should work with in terms of the right? Because the left, there's such a wide range of ideologies over there and they all work together.
Yeah.
Do you think it's permissible that right wing groups like say a secessionist work with a fascist to kick someone out of their local government? You know what I mean? To be on the extremes, but
I mean, I will talk with anyone. I'll talk with people on the left. So the idea that some people are just beyond the pale and shouldn't be entertained at all. I think that idea simply has to go because it's unproductive. If you're right, that should come through when you talk with someone.
Hmm.
And then when it comes to working with people, well, Return to the Land is designed to be a very broad coalition. So Christians, pagans, people with different political ideals can all have their ideals realized in their own respective communities. I think that's great. You know, if you have more libertarian leaning people, they can have a more libertarian community. If you have more collectivist, socialist, or fascist, they can have communities that reflect their values. I don't see why that's not beneficial to all of us to have more communities where we have more support in the event of some kind of legal action against us. The principal reason, like strategically, there are many reasons to have the organization, you know, logistically and to consolidate a membership base to draw on for individual projects and many reasons. But the chief one is so that we are all feeding into a common fund for legal defense, where we can all hire lawyers ultimately that will be on staff and paid to work full time to proactively defend our rights. So, doing it on your own, maybe you have more freedom in some sense. Return to the Land is very hands off, though. There are certain best practices we expect in order to authorize someone as an RTTL affiliate. Like you have to do your basic due diligence and show that you have read the laws in your county pertaining to things like zoning, building permits, septic system laws, health department code, fire code, things that are relevant for building a community. You have to demonstrate that you know what the laws are, where you're saying, I'm going to build a community here. It's like, okay, are you sure that it's legal to build a, because it's not always legal to build a community like this everywhere. In some cases, there are specifically laws against anything resembling a town or urban development on private land. So yeah, Return to the Land expects a certain level of compliance with best practices, but I feel like we've come to the absolute minimum standards that would just avoid an absolute train wreck. And then clearly there are consequences if we allow people to be affiliates and they've not done that basic legal research and then they waste, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of other people's money. We can't have our name associated with that. So yeah, you would sacrifice your ability to do a bad job and not do your adequate research and just do things um, sort of off the cuff. But when it comes to how you organize, what your principles are, you have a lot of latitude. So there's really no legitimate reason I can see why any group in our broader network can't have a community under Return to the Land. And and it shouldn't be a personal thing either. Like maybe you object to me as an individual. I'm not primarily responsible for running the whole thing. You know, I have my own role as the president, but I can also be replaced as the president. It's like we can't have cults of personality running everything in perpetuity. We have to institutionalize and have systems in place that we all are common participants in, because 1,000 little cults of personality, that's going to be abused, where the people running those cults of personality will monetize and then just feed that money into the mainstream system so they can live comfortably while they appease the delusions of those who trust them. And that's wrong, and that's not going to work. But that is the kind of perverse incentive in the back of a lot of people's minds. Like, why should I not work with Patriot Front? Why should I not work with Return to the Land? Because in the back of my mind, I'm going to be the like micro cult leader of my own little sect that knows all the right answers, and we're the ones with the actual truth. And but then in that thought experiment in your mind, also, but I am going to be the highest status person in that community. I'm going to be financially rewarded for it, and I'm going to have total latitude on what this organization does. I'm going to be like the little king of my own little hill. And yeah, it's
Jump in and lead with an iron fist.
Yep.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
and so you talk about how people in Return to the Land have different like religious views and like you're open to pagans and Christians. And like Peter, who you were talking about earlier, isn't he an Orthodox Christian?
he is.
He is. And you also posted a few days ago you went to was it an Episcopalian church?
No, it was a Christian Identity Church. I'm
Christian
not
Identity?
Christian Identity. I went to the church.
Okay.
Check it out.
And I think that this because it seems like a lot of people are very militant on their religious values of, oh well, I'm Orthodox, I'm Catholic, I'm Protestant, I'm pagan. But for you guys to actually set that aside and say, all right, we don't have to kill each other, we can just work together for something better,
Mhm.
is actually the most Christ-like thing you can do, is not hate someone and want to kill someone just because you disagree with them. So that's great that you guys are able to put your differences aside there and work together still.
Nice. Yeah. So that's another thing. Like, you have to be someone that is tolerant of differences within the European race. So if other people don't share your exact religious denomination or political values, you have to at least be willing not to hate them and be aggressive towards them. You could even privately hate them, I guess. You know, we could have RTL members who just hate Christians as long as they never confront Christians about their religion. You know, you got to be a little bit pragmatic here. We need the numbers and we need a big tent. We also can't have an absolute circus. And when the tent gets big enough, it does tend to become a circus. So, how do you prevent that? Well, tolerance, decency, some standard baseline values that just about everyone can live by. Now, we might lose 20% of possible members who are otherwise, white people that we would want in the association. And oh well, there's going to have to be some people that you can't fit in, and then those people can go do their own thing. Like, we're a monogamous organization, we don't believe in polygamy. And that was something we could have left open, but I think a lot of serious social problems come with that. Very problematic behaviors. And so you can go and do like RTTL but with polygamy somewhere else, and we'll lose some people to that. But ultimately there's going to have to be some kind of standard imposed. And that's changed over the course of Return to Land existing. No one person set all of our values or standards. They're pretty minimal, but they've adapted a little bit over time, and they'll continue to adapt over time. So you can either participate in that and help set those standards, or you can demand that you say exactly what it's going to be. And once again, you're going to try to be the king of your own little hill and have your own walled garden. And if we're all in our own little spaces like that, we're absolutely defenseless against our enemies who do manage to work together. So yeah, I mean, some very, very basic standards, and then beyond that, tolerating differences, and we can all work together pretty much.
So there's no Black Hebrew Israelites allowed, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Only traditional European religions. That's another.
Yeah.
White Muslim. Sorry, that's
no white Muslim.
Yeah, traditional European religion.
Yeah, I see that a lot in the UK. There's always that one ginger guy who like has a beard like down to here, and he has like he's a Muslim, and that's a whole other story for another day. How Europe is just being destroyed by illegal immigration, Islam. But who sent the boats over there in the first place? But Eric, this has been we're going on about 2 hours now. I really appreciate your time here and the time you've put out for us to do this podcast. It's been great. We discussed all of our questions, and I hope everything got answered. But yeah, anything you want to finish off on?
No, just thanks for coming on. Like, I really appreciated your advice on organizing, and also your takes on what our communities should look like and how we should build a better political future for ourselves. And no, I'm just really appreciative that you took the time out of your day to come on and talk to us.
Well, sure. Yeah, glad to do it. Thanks for the questions. Good conversation to both of you. Good luck with your podcast. I think it'll be successful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that'll be it for episode 2 of Rising Right Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the second episode, and we will see you all on episode 3.